Hello and welcome to my latest installment in my top 100 Spectrum games. This time we're looking at games 40 to 31. My number 40 game is Academy. Academy was released in 1987 by CRL Group plc, according to the World of Spectrum website. I think I just knew them as CRL back in the day, but CRL Group plc must have been their full name. And was, of course, written by Peter Cook. Now, Academy is the follow-up to Tau Ceti. I never played Tau Ceti. I knew it was a good game. I'd seen it written about in Crash many times, but I never actually got to play it. When I got the chance to play Academy, I jumped on it, and I remember loading it up and playing it and thinking, this is a really good game. Now, I've always been a fan of 3D shooter type games. Elite is definitely one of the best games I've ever played. And I've also been a fan of games where you've got to use a bit of strategy as well. I don't think anyone who's listened to this countdown will be in any doubt that I like a bit of strategy in my games as well. And Academy has both of those in abundance. The backstory to Academy is that after Tau Ceti, the powers that be, being someone called Galcorp, decided that they needed to set up an academy for skimmer pilots. So that's where you're all. You're at the academy for skimmer pilots, and you've got to learn to be a skimmer pilot. To do this, you have multiple missions that you've got to go through. And for every single one of them, you've got to select the most appropriate skimmer and go out and complete the mission. Now, this is a big game. There are lots of missions in this game. I don't think I ever managed to get to the end of it. I've never got to the end of this game, but I got a long way into it. And the missions are loaded in stages, and you can save your progress as well. Now, one of the things I really liked about this game was that you could design your own skimmer. You could actually decide how your skimmer would be, how many mines you'd have, how many missiles you'd have, how many flares you'd have, how many anti-missile missiles you'd have. And you could decide on the layout of the panel as well, so you could move the view screen around to how it would suit you. And I really liked that. At the time, I thought that was an absolute amazing innovation. Now, the first few missions in the game just kind of ease you in. The first one's called If It Moves. And basically, you've got to kill anything that moves. Just go out and blast everything. And they get a bit more difficult, a bit more strategic, and you need to think about them a bit more as you go further and further through the missions. And what I found is that the first few missions, you can use the predefined skimmers. And then for the later ones, basically every single mission, you find that you have to design your own skimmer. But it's a great game. If I could level any criticism at it, the one thing I found is that the 3D effect that you get uses a kind of shading effect. So I remember reading in an interview that Peter Cook had come up with this shading effect where he would have objects, and depending on where the light source was coming on, he would only shade half of the object. Now, the problem is that means that if the light source is kind of anywhere in front of you, then the objects that you see, the baddies that are coming towards you, are sometimes invisible. And I don't think in real life they'd actually be invisible. But that's a really small criticism. Other than that, this is an excellent game. And well worth playing if you've never played it before. And to be honest with you, having revisited it for this review, well worth going back to if you played it back in the day. It's a lot harder than I remember. Now, I was actually given this game. Someone at school, one of my friends, a guy called Craig Douglas. And Craig, if you listen to this, big shout out to you. He gave me this game. He gave me this game and actually lent me another one that's in this list that I'll talk about later in the list. And I remember getting it and I played it for a while and I really enjoyed it. And then saying to him, do you want it back? And he said, no, you can keep it. And it was like, really? It was such a good game. I think I'd have kept it forever, and I have. I still have it. So, Craig, if you really want it back, get in touch with me, and I'll post it back to you. But this is an excellent game. So that's my number 40 game, Academy. My number 39 game is Subaquatic. Subaquatic was released in 2009 and published by Uberez Productions, according to the World of Spectrum website. I hope I've pronounced that right. and was of course written by the Mojo twins. Now this is a homebrew game, it's a modern game, and like some of the other homebrew games in this list, I found this through the Spectrum Bible, the final volume which covered all the homebrew games that had been made since 2000. Now the review in that book of this game was really positive. And it was one of the ones where I read the review and I thought I must play that, and when I did, I really enjoyed it. The game has support for additional Spectrum ROMs, some of the more advanced ROMs that have been created since the Spectrum was first sold back in the day. And that means that you can actually get additional colours on the game. The only thing is, I'm not sure whether I play it with additional colours or not. If the video that you see while you're listening to this looks like it has those additional colours, then I must have. Another thing I really like about this game is the music. It's 128K, so it has the better music that you can get with that machine. And it's just a nice little tune that kind of plays along in the background. It's repeated quite often, but it never gets incessant. Now when you first start playing this game, it's pretty difficult actually. It's not a game that you're going to complete on your first run through. And some Mojo twin games can be a bit easy. The Hobbit game that they did when the Hobbit movie first came out, I actually completed on my second run through. To be honest with you, once you get the ring, it starts to become quite a lot easier. But this game took quite a bit of practice, not too much, it's not too hard, which I like. You don't want something that's really difficult. I've recently been playing a lot of the Jet Set Willy mods for the Spectrum show, and some of them were really hard and really difficult to get into, and you're thinking, well, if this is a homebrew game and you've got quite a limited audience for them, don't make it too hard, don't make it off-putting straight away. And this game certainly doesn't do that. And it looks absolutely gorgeous, it's got really vibrant colours. Kind of reminiscent of Sabrewulf in a way. When I first saw this, I thought this looks like an Ultimate game, and Sabrewulf's the one it's most like. It's also like Sabrewulf in that it's a maze game, and you've got to find 4 things to get out of the maze. Those 4 objects are a mask, a flower, a map, and a diamond. And once you've got them, then you have to head back to your boat. Now the map isn't as big as the map in Sabrewulf, so it's not huge, it's not loads and loads of screens, but it's a good size and it's quite intricate, and it takes you a while to find your way around it. You've also got to plan your route carefully, so towards the end of the game you have to flick switches to open walls to get you to other areas of the maze. Now very quickly after this game, the Mojo twins released a follow-up called Subaquatic Reloaded, and that's well worth seeking out as well. It's not as linear a game, the map isn't as linear in Subaquatic Reloaded, and you've got to kind of go to different areas of the map. Now I have completed both of these, and I think actually I've done walkthroughs of both of these but haven't recorded a commentary for them, and I will do at some point. So a little bit more about the gameplay of this game. You have baddies of course, and they consist of fish which move left and right or up and down, and jellyfish which move randomly. And these fish deplete your oxygen. Other things that deplete your oxygen are swimming through the undergrowth or the seaweed, and generally just moving about depletes your oxygen. Now you start the game with 1 life, and you can find bubbles which give you additional oxygen, which are basically additional lives, and you need to know where these are and seek them out. At any point if you return to the surface, it will replenish your oxygen supply. Now that's really useful, but can be tricky to do, because some parts of the game you're a long way from the surface, you're delving deep into caves, so you need to find some of those extra lives to keep you going. And that's it, there's not much more to this game than that. It's a maze game, you've got to find 4 things and get out. But it's well worth playing, I really love it. I love the mechanic of it as well. Play mechanic is that you always float to the surface, or float towards the surface. So you basically have left, right and down. You also have a fire key because you have a harpoon gun and you can shoot harpoons, but you have a limited supply of these. However, you do get 2 extra harpoons every time you find one of the items you need to complete the game. So those have to be used very sparingly. So that's my number 39 game, Subaquatic. My number 38 game is Swords and Sorcery. Swords and Sorcery was released in 1985 by PSS Software. And I remember at the time there'd been a long wait for this game. The adverts for Swords and Sorcery had been in various magazines for months and months before the game finally appeared. Now, a long time ago, I reviewed this game on the Retro Gamer website. And what I said about it was that it was a flawed classic, and I think I'd still stick by that. The game makes a bold attempt to bring the pencil and paper role-playing game experience to the computer. It has wandering monsters, random events, you level up, you're able to collect gold and swords and magic items, and do a lot of the things that you can do if you play something like Dungeons and Dragons. And a good example of this is the way you can talk to monsters. So you can threaten monsters, you can flatter monsters, you can bribe monsters, to actually see if you can get past them by something other than fighting them. While that sounds good in practice, the implementation just doesn't work very well. And in fact, the only way I ever found that I could advance in this game was to get really, really good at magic, and then go into any particular room all guns blazing. The Fireball and the Electro Bolt spell are particularly useful, and when you get to very high levels of magic, the Strength spell is invaluable. Another thing this game came under criticism for was the control method. So you don't type commands into the game, but you don't have a menu-driven system either. Well, you do have a menu-driven system, but the control is really strange. Down the bottom of the screen, there is a scrolling to the left and right menu of options that you can select. And you use the keys 1 and 3 to scroll left and right, and 2 to select it. And that's how you select all the commands in the game. And then there are nested menus. Now that's not bad for some commands, e.g. magic, fireball, let loose. But for others, such as taking something out of the chest, it can be really, really cumbersome. Another thing I never liked about this game was that as you get more things, you become encumbered and your character slows down. Now, while that's very realistic, it slows the game down for no real reason. And if I'm playing this game today on a modern emulator, I just crank up the speed a bit. And in fact, I enjoy playing it now more than I enjoyed playing it back in the day. And while I criticise the game, I really, really love this game. I played it loads back in the day. And even now, when I came to record the gameplay for this review, I started playing the game and I thought, I'll play for about 5-10 minutes. I think I played it for 2 or 3 hours. And that wasn't 2 or 3 hours non-stop. I actually played it for probably about an hour and then kept coming back to it and playing the same game just because I was enjoying it so much. Now, the screen is quite well done in this game. You have a 3D view, then you have an information panel. The information panel being below the 3D view. And to the right of the 3D view, there is either a map or something called magic numbers. And the magic numbers give you your stats in the game, so they tell you how much strength you've got, how many hit points you've got, how much magic you've got. And as you progress through the game, you level up, so you get better at a certain thing. How you level up is determined on what you've been doing. So if you use magic to defeat a monster, you'll get better at magic. If you use swords, fighting skills to defeat a monster, you'll get better at sword fighting, etc. And as I say, the only way I've ever found to really progress in this game is to get really good at magic. Now, when this game originally came out, it was £9.95, but there was a budget version that was £3.99. And I'm pretty sure I had the budget version. I certainly don't remember paying £10 for this game, but I did have a lot of fun playing it, as I said. When I actually got this, I played it for days and days and days. I've always liked role-playing games. I always like games where you advance in levels and skill up and get new spells. There's something really good about the discovery of what's next. What spells will I get next? There was supposed to be a follow-up to this game called Hero Quest. It was advertised, but it was never released. It's a pity, really. I thought this game had a lot of potential. There are bugs in the game that mean you can't complete it, and there is, on the World of Spectrum site, a fix for the bugs that someone's done that you can complete. What you have to do is save your character, then load a program into your Spectrum, then load your saved character into the fixing program, and that will resave your character and fix your game. However, I've never actually been able to get that to work. If you've never played this game, it's worth trying out But beware, you'll probably find the control a bit cumbersome to start with and a bit frustrating, especially until you learn your way around the menus, and even after you learn your way around the menus. But if you like role-playing games, there is fun to be had in this game. And I definitely found that fun. So that's my number 38 game, Swords and Sorcery. My number 37 game is Cookie. Cookie was released in 1983 by Ultimate Play the Game, and was one of the batch of games that they released after Jetpack that were also 16k. So they released Jetpack, and then I'm never sure which order the next games came in, but they then released 3 more 16k games, Psst, Trans Am, and Cookie. Now, out of all the Ultimate games, Cookie's the one that I have the most love-hate relationship with. It's a great game, it's a lovely little game, but it can be frustratingly difficult at times. You played Charlie the Chef, and what you've got to do is use bags of flour to blast ingredients that come out of the pantry on the right hand side of the screen into the bowl at the bottom of the screen. If you touch any of the ingredients, they kill you. There's also a kind of Oscar the Grouch character that comes out of the bins that flank either side of the bowl at the bottom of the screen. And he throws some horrible yucky objects, fish skeletons and things like that, at you, and they bounce around the screen, and if they hit you, you die. And you can use the flour bags to either blast them into the bins or blast it into the bowl. But if you blast it into the bowl, you'll need more ingredients to hide the flavour of the horrible things that come out of the bins. To be honest with you, I think the chef should just have thrown everything away and started again. I'm not sure whether I'd like a cookie that had stuff that had come out of some bins in it, even if it did have a load of extra ingredients. The final antagonists in the game are a bolt and a washer that will also come out the pantry. Now, all the other baddies and all the other things that can kill you kind of bounce around the screen in either random or kind of preset patterns. The bolts will home in on you, so they make the game even more difficult. And that's the thing, it's incredibly frenetic. You just get things thrown at you all the time, and you've got to keep moving and keep your wits about you. Thinking about it, the game it's probably closest to like that is Defender. In Defender, you have exactly the same thing. You've got things coming from all sides, and you've really got to keep your wits about you. You've got to keep constantly on the move in Defender. Now, in Cookie, you don't have to keep constantly on the move, but you have to be on the move quite a lot of the time. Now, I did play this game a little bit back in the day, but I really got into it when I got the Ultimate Collection. That was a compilation released by Ultimate in collaboration with Crash, and they released a compilation of a lot of their games. It wasn't all of them, they didn't include Underworld. I've never been a big fan of Underworld, so I didn't mind that. But I used to go through that collection one game at a time and load them up and play them. And Cookie tended to be one of the early 16k games that I really stuck on. It's very arcadey and has that just one more go factor. In fact, of all those early Ultimate games, I think if this had been put in an arcade machine, it would probably have made the most money. Because it's really difficult to master, and it does have that one more go, put one more 10p in factor that those early arcade games needed to be successful. The way to pull the money in was to get people addicted to the game and make sure the game was just long enough so they didn't feel ripped off, but not so long that you wouldn't get a good stream of 10p's into the machine. If you haven't played this, it's well worth checking out. If you die very quickly the first few times, don't worry about it, keep going. If you get up to the second screen and think, oh wow, this is hard, if this keeps getting this hard this fast, then I'll never be able to get to the end and see the cookie. Then don't worry, for some reason, the second screen is actually the most difficult. There's kind of green fuzzy things that come out of the pantry and you've got to hit them into the bowl. And the way they move makes them the hardest things in the game. Now, it's distribution denied on World of Spectrum, so you'll either have to find an original or find some other way to play this game. It isn't on the Rare Replay collection, so you can't play it via that method. It was released as a ROM cartridge, all the Ultimate 16k games were. So you can get that and play it, but it did command quite a premium price as a ROM cartridge. Or it does now anyway. So that's my number 37 game, Cookie. My number 36 game is The Hobbit. The Hobbit was released in 1982, yeah, all the way back in 1982, by Melbourne House. It was written by Beam Software, which comprised of Philip Mitchell and Veronica Megler. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to have to read something out that's on the World of Spectrum website. Veronica remembers it was never released in the US because some company owned the rights to the pictures and wouldn't let us license it there. On the funny side, in a pre-release version, I'd written an angry dwarf that kept trying to kill you. And if you did something, I don't remember what, it became a randy dwarf and kept following you around and propositioning you. But Fred and Phil decided that was a little too much and made me take it out. Now, Veronica, I don't know if you're ever going to listen to this, but if you do, that is a great story, and I really applaud you for writing a randy dwarf in The Hobbit. I think it would have got a lot more publicity and been an even bigger hit if you'd have left that in. Now, there aren't many text adventures in this list, but there are a few, and this is by far the best text adventure I played back in the day. The other ones are on this list. I think actually Lord of the Rings and Mad Martha are the only other two that you'll find. But I did like this game. This was an excellent game. Everyone had it. Loads of people played it. It got me into the Lord of the Rings books as well. The Hobbit book came with the game. The game came in a kind of really, really big fat plastic case. And within that case was the cassette with the game on it and the Hobbit book. And similarly, Lord of the Rings came with the Fellowship of the Ring and the game. And actually, I think I liked the book even more than the game. I remember really enjoying the book and then getting The Lord of the Rings and reading that as well. And this game was so much more than other adventure games at the time. When you think it was back in 1982, and you could do a lot more than simple verb-noun input in The Hobbit. It used something called English, spelt I-English, which would allow you to do quite complex sentences for the time. And to be honest, on the Spectrum, I don't think that input method was really improved upon very, very much. A lot of text adventures were simple verb-noun input. Get sword, kill goblin, etc, etc. Whereas this, you could ask Thorin or Gandalf to do things, to pick you up, to put you down, to throw you. Actually, I've never tried asking one of them to throw me in the game. I wonder what happens if you do that. And it really added a lot of depth to the game. I think at the time the graphics in the game were applauded as well. A lot of text adventures were text only with no graphics. Whereas this had some locations where you got a screen full of a picture. They did take a long time to draw and would slow the game down a little. And now when I play this game, I do crank the emulator up a little bit to get over that slowdown. It also helps the inputting of the sentences as well if you speed the emulator up a bit. But it was a great game at the time. It's a great game to come back to as well. You don't get text adventures anymore. The text adventure was superseded by the point-and-click adventure. And the point-and-click adventure has made a bit of a comeback of late. And I love point-and-click adventures as well, by the way. Day of the Tentacle has to be my favourite. But this was the pinnacle of text adventures for a long, long time. The go-to text adventure. If you hadn't played a text adventure and you wanted one to play, this was the definitive go-to text adventure. Pretty much for the entire life of the Spectrum. So that's my number 36 game, The Hobbit. My number 35 game is Football Manager. Like The Hobbit, Football Manager was released in 1982, but this time by Addictive Games, and was of course written by Kevin Toms. And most people who had this game will know exactly what Kevin looked like because his picture was on the front cover of the cassette, as well as being on the adverts for this game in numerous magazines. It's quite strange doing this game straight after doing The Hobbit, because, of course, The Hobbit was the same year, and is my definitive top of my list for adventure games, whereas this is my definitive top of my list for strategy games. Now, anyone who's listened to the other entries in this series, or any of my other recordings, will know I love a strategy game. These kind of text-based, statistics-based, choose various options and put numbers in games, I absolutely adore. And while many people don't like those games as much as I do, they still love this game. And of course, football managing games continue to this day and have had many different iterations and been built upon and built upon and built upon. And Football Manager is still a franchise that's going strong even now. What's even more remarkable was that this game was written in BASIC. Now, like a few of the other games on this list, whenever I play this, I crank up the emulator speed a bit. It really helps, particularly with things like calculating the league table at the end of a particular week's games and with the highlights of the games. And the highlights of the games was something that really made this game. So if you've never played it before, really? You've never played this before? Then when you actually go into a game against an opposition, you see some highlights of the game. And they're excellent. They're little tiny stick men on a huge big field playing with a square ball. But that doesn't matter. The excitement's still there. Your attackers can come along and try for a goal and sometimes miss by miles. Other times the opposition defenders will get in the way and clear the ball. Other times the ball will rocket into the net, into the top corner. Other times still the opposition will clear the ball, then one of your other players will pick it up and rifle it into the net. And sometimes you even get a kind of game of ping pong where your players and the opposition are bouncing the ball between them. Will it end up in the net or not? All the excitement of a Saturday down at the football ground. Well, maybe not quite. It's certainly a lot more rewarding than watching England play. So my neighbour had this game, and he was a mad keen footballer. I remember some days back when we were kids, you'd hear him outside playing. It would be raining, there would be no one else outside, and he'd be kicking the football against the wall, screaming commentary just under his breath to himself. And we used to go to his house, or he used to bring the cassette to my house, and we used to play it for hours and hours and hours and hours. I think I left my Spectrum on once with this game for a week. One game in the Spectrum, and we just left it on for a week, and we come back to it after school every evening and keep playing and keep trying to win the FA Cup and keep trying to win the league. There were players in there that you recognise from on the telly. He'd use the names. I don't know if he needed licensing back then. He probably didn't have a license to use Kevin Keegan's name or anyone else's name. You just put them into the game. And there were the teams that you saw every Saturday when you watched the results come in on the BBC. Some of those teams, of course, aren't quite as high flyers as they were back then. Ipswich and Forest spring instantly to mind. But this was as close as you were ever going to get to managing your own football team. And as I say, the highlights made it pretty exciting as well when you had to watch them. Very simple, but very well done. I won't go into detail about the mechanics of this game, but basically you pick a team and that gives you 5 statistics. Your morale, your stamina, defence, midfield and attack. And you can see the same statistics for your opposition. And if you're lucky, and if you're better than the opposition, then you win. And you get a league position calculated based on how many games you've won, drawn, etc. Just as you would in the real league. You can also enter FA Cup matches, which is a simple knockout competition. If you lose one FA Cup match, you don't get any more. And it is possible for a 4th division team to win the FA Cup in this game. And that was it. You can buy and sell players as well, which was always good. And I found you always needed to buy and sell players to do well in this game. So that's my number 35 game, Football Manager. My number 34 game is Hero. Hero was released in 1984 by Activision. This was a port of an Atari 2600 game, and if this was my list of top Atari games, I think this would be number 1. Now, for anyone who's thinking there are loads of better Atari games than this, then please don't shoot me because I haven't played a lot of Atari 2600 games. And I didn't realise this was an Atari 2600 game until years later when I bought the Activision Anthology for the PlayStation 2. And this came with it, and I thought, wow, this is a good game. I remember playing this on the Spectrum. So Hero stands for Helicopter Elevation Rescue Operation. And basically, you're a guy who's got a helicopter on his back, some dynamite and an eye laser. Now, I don't know what it is about eye lasers, but when you're a kid, I don't think there's anything better than eye lasers. I remember seeing the Superman film and thinking if I could have one of Superman's powers, other than flight, it would have to be those eye lasers. And you have to navigate a series of mazes and rescue some trapped miners. Now you only have to find the miners. Once you found them, that's okay, you go on to the next level, you don't have to get out. And the mazes start off really simple and just get progressively longer and longer and so harder and harder. There are a number of baddies in this game. There are a kind of flying bat thing, a funny spiky thing, a snake that comes out of a wall, and I think that's about it. There aren't a huge amount of different baddies in this game. Other things that can kill you are getting too close to one of your sticks of dynamite when you let it off. And some of the walls are superheated, they kind of glow, and if you touch any of those glowing walls you die as well. The dynamite's used to blow down thin walls, so every now and then you'll find that your path's blocked by a wall, and you need to use the dynamite to blow it up to keep going through the game. And quite often what happens is you have a choice of paths, so you can go left and down, or you can go right but have to blow a wall up. And what I've always found with this game is, if you've got a choice of blowing a wall up to continue, you need to blow a wall up to continue. Each room has a light in it, but if you touch that light, you break it, and the room is plunged into darkness. You can see the baddies moving around, but nothing else. If you light a stick of dynamite though, you do get to see what's going on in the room. So sometimes you come into a room, it's plunged into darkness, but you reach a dead end. An instinct tells you that what you need to do is drop some dynamite there, you'll blow up a wall that's blocking you, causing the dead end. But also that gives you a chance to see what else is in the room so you can plan your route. Now I can't remember when I actually first played this game. I remember seeing the plastic case that it came in, and I think it was one of those bargain bin games, so I think I got it later on in Spectrum's life. I certainly didn't play it in 1984. I think I got this game later in the Spectrum's life. I don't know if Activision made far too many of these tapes. And I think if there's one theme that's coming through in this, it's that I very rarely like to pay full price for a game. But I do remember I played this game a lot. I played it again and again and again and really liked it, and I started to be able to memorise the different mazes. So the first few mazes are pretty intuitive and very short and you can just go through them. As you get deeper and deeper into the game, it gets a bit more difficult. And really you need to remember what's coming next, you need to know what's coming next, and I started to be able to do that. The funny thing is, I've never been a fan of that kind of game. The kind of shoot 'em up where it's just a memory test never really appeals to me, and yet it did with this game. Going back to it now, I can still get through quite a few of the levels, but I'm nowhere near as good as I was when I was a kid. I don't think I could complete it as a kid, but I could get pretty close. And one of the things the game gives you is the ability to skip forward in levels, so you don't have to start on level 1, you can kind of practice at the harder levels. And I think I used to do that for a bit, and then go back to the start and see how far I could get. You get extra lives in this game, and if you can do the first few levels without too much of a mishap, then you can accumulate a few extra lives to help you in some of the later levels. One thing that does happen in the later levels I remember is that the baddies speed up. Now in a strange way, that can actually help you, like the snakes that come out the wall. Sometimes when you first enter a room, if you can't see them, it comes as a bit of a surprise when a snake pops out the wall and bites you. Whereas when they speed up, that never happens because you can always see where they are straight away. It's a great game, it's well worth checking out. It is distribution denied on the World of Spectrum website, so you'll have to get it by other means. I think there are a lot of these tapes made, as I said, so you can probably get it on eBay quite cheaply. Or, if you want to play the original 2600 version, you can get it on the Activision Anthology on the PlayStation 2. So that's my number 34 game, Hero. My number 33 game is Bounder. Bounder was released in 1986 by Gremlin Graphics Software Limited. I didn't buy it when it was originally released. I bought it on Full Crash Smashers 2. And the reason I bought Bounder was actually to get my hands on Starquake. I'd bought Wizard's Lair years and years before and really liked it, and realised that Starquake was also by Stephen Crow. And when I read the review of Full Crash Smashers 2, I thought, I'm going to buy that, there's some good games on that. And the kind of bonus extra game that I didn't buy the compilation for, but always really loved off it, was Bounder. It's a really simple but really good game. You're a tennis ball and you bounce up a road and you have to avoid lots and lots of things that will kill you. There are baddies that move around, some move vertically, some move horizontally, some move diagonally. There are lots of squares that if you land on them, they'll kill you. There are some squares that if you just move over them, they'll kill you. There are question marks dotted around the road that you're moving up, and every time you land on one of these question marks, you get some kind of bonus. And in the last series of the Spectrum show, when I was doing the playing tips section, I actually did some playing tips for Bounder that showed that on the first level, I think you can end the game, or end the first level, with something like 16 additional lives. That's if you plan your route right and get it just right, landing in all the question marks. When I had this game back in the day, I remember that I perfected that and could get all those extra lives on the first screen every time. And could also get quite a few extra lives on the second screen. Now the third and fourth screens I hadn't mastered in that way, so I don't think I ever got any further than the fifth screen. Because believe me, in this game, sometimes you can just lose life after life after life really, really quickly. It never feels that unfair. I've talked about games before, things like Saberwolf and Starquake itself, where sometimes you die and it feels unfair, but they reward you by giving you lots of extra lives. This isn't quite like that. This game is just rock hard, but rewards you for that by giving you lots of extra lives. Now I believe this game was also released for the Commodore 64. I'm pretty sure there was a version for the Commodore 64, and the Spectrum version may even be a port of the Commodore 64 version. And I think it gets loads and loads of kudos on the Commodore 64, much more than it ever did on the ZX Spectrum. Which is strange in a way, because I really loved the Spectrum version. I guess the Commodore version would have more colour, which would probably help in the game. If the bad squares were coloured differently to the good squares, that would really be a big help. Now, as I say, I bought this game on 4 Crash Smashers and played it loads, really played it to death. And even now, going back to it, it's still very enjoyable. I think the appeal of this game is that it's just completely unique. It's different to any other game out there and any other game I think I've played before. If anyone knows of any similar games where you have this bouncing mechanic, please let me know. I'd actually like to try them out. As I say, it can be difficult at times, which can make it really, really frustrating, but it makes up for that in giving you the opportunity to get lots of extra lives and just being a bit different. It's not a long game. A typical game only lasts a few minutes and is very frantic. And that's a good thing. A lot of the best games are like that. Defender springs to mind. And I don't think there's much more to say about it than that. That's my number 33 game, Bounder. My number 32 game is Rebel Star. Rebel Star was released in 1986 by Firebird and was written by Julian Gallop, who of course has wrote many such tactical simulations, including Laser Squad that I reviewed earlier in this list. Now let me start with a confession. At the start of this particular segment of this list, I mentioned that Craig Douglas had given me Academy, and it was really kind of him, and I really thank him yet again for that. Craig also lent me, over one weekend, his copy of Rebel Star, and I think I pretty much spent the entire weekend playing it. And while I was playing it, I wanted to save the game. I was playing the one-player game, I wanted to save my progress. I didn't have a cassette handy, so I flipped the cassette over and recorded my saved game on the B-side of the tape. That was not realising that the B-side of Rebel Star had the two-player game on. The A-side had the one-player game and the B-side had the two-player game. That's how the cassette came. And of course, I just taped over Craig's two-player game, which he used to play with his friends all the time. Now, I still remember this, and I remember him being really annoyed about it. I think I lent him a game later, and he just recorded over the middle of it and ruined it. Which I suppose is fair enough, but I'm still sorry about it, Craig. If you want it, I would track you down a Rebel Star cassette on eBay and send it to you now, making sure the B-side, the two-player side, still works. The reason this is so high in my list is this was the first of this kind of game that I ever played. I played this long before I played Laser Squad. I think later in the Spectrum's life, it actually came out on a cover tape or something like that. I can't remember, but I remember when I got back into emulation and you could get these games off the internet, I downloaded Rebel Star quite quickly, remembering it was so good and played it a lot. We actually used to play the two-player game. It wasn't until years later I played the two-player game against some friends at university that I realised what a good two-player game this was. You take control of one of two forces. In the single-player game, you always take control of the raiders. And in the two-player game, one person takes control of the raiders and another can take control of the defenders. Of a moon base, I think it is. The raiders have to break into the moon base and destroy a computer. Now, they can have additional help if they destroy 3 laser defense computers. If you destroy the 3 laser defense computers, you get reinforcements. Now, the raiders only have a few weapons in the game. There's a light rifle, a lightsaber, which of course comes straight from a very, very popular science fiction movie series, and a photon. Now, the photon's kind of the machine gun. So the laser rifle shoots single kind of shots and takes a lot of action points to shoot. Whereas the photon, you can do lots and lots and lots of shots very, very quickly. I think there are some others. I think there are some other things that you can shoot with, but those are the main two. And basically, what you have to do if you're the raiders is get inside the moon base. So your combat droids have to use their blowtorches to blow open the airlocks. Kill as many of the defenders as you can, get to the security doors, which again need the combat droids and their blowtorches, and destroy the computer. Now, against the computer itself, against the Spectrum, this game isn't that difficult. The AI isn't that good, but it's still a lot of fun. And one of the big innovations that this game brought was Opportunity Fire. So it's a turn-based game. All units have a certain number of action points. You use your action points and then you let the next player have their turn, i.e. the computer or your friend playing the defenders. One of the options you have when it's your turn is Opportunity Fire, and this means that if someone comes into your line of view while they are moving in their turn, you have a chance at shooting them. Now that adds a great deal of sophistication to this kind of game. Just imagine chess where if someone makes a move, their piece instantly dies or gets taken. Yeah, it doesn't work with chess, does it? Okay, scrub that. But it does add a lot of sophistication to this game. Going back and playing it now, it wasn't as good as I remember. Now, when I compiled this list, I did it off memories rather than going and playing every single game and then compiling the list. To be honest, I think if I'd have gone back and played all the games before compiling the list, I'd probably have swapped this and Laser Squad around. Laser Squad is a much better game than this. But for pure nostalgia reasons, this got higher, and I did like this game, and it was the first of this type I played. So that's my number 32 game, Rebel Star. My number 31 game is Starglider. Starglider was released in 1986 by Rainbird Software and was developed by Real Time Games Limited. I think it was a port of an Amiga game. Starglider had originally come out on the Amiga, I think, a very early game for the Amiga, probably in 1986, and was very, very well received and was ported to various 8-bit systems. And the guys at Real Time did a really, really good job on this. It's a 3D vector game similar to Elite. I love Elite. I thought Elite was brilliant. I particularly think that the Spectrum version of Elite is very, very good. I've seen it lauded as quite a good conversion in magazines and interviews and things like that before, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. I've played the BBC version, I've played the Commodore version, and I think the Spectrum version stands up to them very, very well. But back to Starglider. The backstory to Starglider is that there is a planet which is home to the space-going Starglider birds. And this planet has very, very powerful sentinels in orbit around it that protect it from any alien invasion. And one particular group of aliens decide they want to invade the planet, and they realise that the Starglider birds are allowed through this barrier of sentinels. So they make all their ships look like Stargliders, and they invade the planet and they take it over because they don't have very good ground defences. On a moon of this planet, there are some people there who have access to a very, very old kind of jet fighter. And you end up piloting this jet fighter down to the surface of the planet and destroying all the defences and helping the citizens of the planet gain their planet back. Now that's quite a long backstory, and this game came packaged similarly to Elite, so you got a flight manual and you also got a novella with it. And that story was all played out in the novella. The display of your ship in Starglider shows you various things: your height, your speed, bottom left and bottom right, and then kind of you have a scanner. Then across the top you have things like your laser energy, your plasma energy, which is actually what keeps you going forward, your number of missiles, and your shield energy. If you run out of shield energy or plasma energy, it is game over. To replenish your missiles and shields and laser energy, you can land at various kinds of bunkers. These are strangely reminiscent of Elite in one way, but not in another, as kind of a rotating yellow wedge of cheese that you need to fly into the kind of thick edge to get into these bunkers to replenish your supplies. Now, there's a white version or a white kind of wedge of cheese thing that looks very, very similar to these, that when you get to the thick side, when the thick side rotates to face you, fires 3 missiles at you, so you've got to make sure you get the right one. Playing this game on a black and white TV must have been murder, but I think by 1986 very few people had black and white TV. To replenish your plasma energy, you have to fly along some power cables. And there are a kind of series of 3 towers. There's 1 tower at one end of the power cables and 2 towers at the other end. And you kind of fly through the 2 towers and fly slowly along the power cables, and that replenishes your plasma energy. And there's even a bit of backstory about that, how Daredevil pilots discovered this. Now, there are a lot of different baddies in this game. The main one, the kind of boss, is Starglider 1 itself, which is the main invasion ship. And that's a yellow Starglider that kind of flies around flapping its wings and does a lot of damage shooting at you. And what you need to do is to fire 2 missiles to destroy that. Now, in the 128K version of the game, when you fire a missile, you actually then control the missile. You actually have a kind of cockpit view of the missile, and you have to fly it into the back of the Starglider, which is a really good effect. I did try it, and my missile was almost instantly destroyed. I think I was too close to the Starglider. You've actually got to fly it into the back of the Starglider when you go a bit further away. You've got to fire it a bit further away to get it into the back of Starglider 1. Now, I bought this game back in the day. I'd loved Elite and got Elite a few years earlier for Christmas and wanted something similar. And this is kind of a arcade version of Elite. That sounds a bit strange, but I remember an interview, I think, with the creators of Elite, probably David Brabant, saying that when they'd first come up with Elite, the company that they went to publish it wanted to put a score in it. And they said, no, that's not the game, it's not like that, that's not how it works. And this feels like what Elite would have been if it had had a scoring system in it. Yes, you can dock. Yes, you can replenish missiles. There's no trading in it. It's not like Elite there. It takes all the intelligence out of Elite, and all you've got to do is blast things and get your score higher and higher and higher. But you can always find a way to replenish your shields and replenish your plasma energy. And once I kind of worked out that mechanic, I used to play this for hours and hours and hours. I could get the highest score by miles. There's a preset high score table, and getting the top score on that was easy. You could play for a long, long time. And while that was great, I mean, it's an excellent game. I kind of limited the life of it as well. Once you'd worked out how to get a really high score, you could dock and get more missiles and fly around, and dock again and fly around and kill some things, and then recharge your plasma energy and fly around, kill some things, and dock and get your lasers and shields replenished. Yeah, it falls a bit short. It's still an excellent game. It's still very high up in this list, and there are many, many games that were of this kind that aren't as good. There was a follow-up, Starglider 2. I'm not sure what that added to the gameplay. I've never played it, but I'm sure it's worth checking out. When I was researching this on the internet, there was talk of a Starglider 3. I don't know if that'll ever come to pass, but if it does, I can imagine that will be very, very good as well. So that's my number 31 game, Starglider. So that concludes this section of my top 100 Spectrum games. At 40, we have Academy, 39, Subaquatic, 38, Swords and Sorcery, 37, Cookie, 36, The Hobbit, 35, Football Manager, 34, Hero, 33, Bounder, 32, Rebel Star, and at number 31, Starglider. I hope you all enjoyed that. Until next time, happy gaming!